Well, howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. It is a Q&A episode. Folks, got a great question here. They're always great questions, but I like this one. From Soul Alchemist. First of all, great friggin' name. Love that. Soul Alchemist. Thank you very much, Soul Alchemist, for the question. So what does gabapentin do to the channels? What is in reference to the channel, they mean VGCCs, or voltage-gated calcium channels. This is a question on a video that I had talking about adenosine and how adenosine can negatively impact voltage-gated calcium channels. So what does gabapentin do to those channels? So how I want to start off this episode is going over what are VGCCs, just in case you didn't see the video that this question was posted on, which shame on you for not seeing that video. Although this time I will give you a pass. Only one time. All right. So as the name implies, voltage-gated calcium channel, VGCCs. It is a gated channel depending on voltage. All right. So I'm going to pop a picture up here of a VGCC that we're going to be talking about in this episode. But keep in mind that there are different types of VGCCs in the body, all right? I believe the ones that we're going to be talking about, which are in the neurons, specifically the presynaptic neuron, the N-type VGCCs, or you'll see it in literature as CAV 2.2. So it's made up of different subunits. Now, all these subunits are proteins that our neurons make, okay? In the middle, all right, that's the actual pore of the VGCC. That's what allows the calcium to come into the neuron. That is the alpha 1 subunit. All right. Then over to one side, you'll have the gamma subunit. Then on the other side, you will have the delta subunit. Now it's bonded through a disulfide bond to the alpha 2 subunit. If you watch the videos, other previous videos, which thank you very much if you did, you'll kind of say, disulfide bond, Howard talked about that before. Yes, I did. We were talking about N-acetylcysteine, NAC, and how it creates, helps to create glutathione in the liver. Well, I talked about how, why take NAC? Why not just take cysteine, the actual amino acid itself? Why take N-acetylcysteine? Because the cysteine will bond together at the sulfur atoms. They create a disulfide bond there. So that's how the delta subunit is attached to the alpha 2 subunit through a disulfide bond. All right, that's extracellularly, so that's outside. If the voltage-gated calcium channel, if it's sitting in the cell membrane, well, the alpha 2 delta subunit is sitting outside of the membrane, all right, extracellularly. Well, then intracellularly, so inside the neuron, you have the beta subunit. So now we know the basic structure of the voltage-gated calcium channel. What is it for then? Well, I mean, we know it's letting in calcium. I just described that, but why? Why is it doing that? They facilitate the release of neurotransmitters to then continue the action potential from one neuron to the next neuron in order to get to where it needs to go, in order for us to do what we need to do. Let's talk about the neuron setup. So I'm going to pop up a picture of a neuron here. We have over here is the soma. That's the cell body. That's where you have your rough endoplasmic reticulum, which we're going to be talking about here. You have the nucleus of the cell, and then you have spiny projections from that soma. Those are the dendrites. Now, I'm not going to put it here. It's not going to be in the image, but on the other side of those dendrites are the axon terminals of another neuron, all right? So the axon terminals of the one we have here are going to be right over here on the other end, all right? So I'm not going to put it in the picture, but there are dendrites of another neuron on the outside of this image, and really in reality, there could be multiple dendrites connected to these axon terminals, all going into all different neurons that are connected. Right? So In the axon terminal at the end of this neuron, that's where the neurotransmitters are stored, all right? They're stored in vesicles. They're like little sacs where they have them, and whenever they're needed, that's where they get released from, all right? So again, those VGCCs are down there. The ones we're going to be talking about are down there on those axon terminals, right there. And I think it's called the active zone. That means it's right there, right next to the storage vesicles of those neurotransmitters that are ready to be released. I believe it's called the ready releasable state or ready releasable area. I'll put it up here. I forget this stuff. Essentially, that's the area to where the storage vesicles there of the neurotransmitters, those are the next ones that are going to be released to continue that action potential, all right? And so the VGCCs are right there. So when that calcium comes in, it takes effect right away. The quicker, the better, all right? So we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, and I'm going to backtrack and go over this so hopefully it'll make sense to you all. So now we're going to go into what is this elusive action potential that I keep talking about? Like, you keep mentioning action potential. What the heck is that? Well, it's essentially ions. And I've had videos on this before. Mostly sodium ions. All right, there could be calcium there, but mostly sodium ions. So if we can imagine, let's bring the picture of the neuron up here again. And then you have axon terminals from other neurons that are, not touching, but very, very close. I mean, you can't put your fingers close enough in order to, the gap between the two. It's very, very tiny, the gap. You have the axon terminals, almost meeting these dendrites of this neuron that we're looking at here in the image that I posted here, right? Well, you have neurotransmitters that will go across that area between the axon terminal and the dendrite of our favorite neuron here. And that area in between there is called the synaptic cleft, all right? And the whole idea of the neurotransmitters is that they will be released, they go across, they bind to receptors on the dendrites, and then that facilitates the continuation of that action potential down our favorite neuron here, and then eventually to our third favorite neuron to continue on with that signal, all right? So when the neurotransmitters bind to receptors on those dendrites, the postsynaptic neuron, there are ion channels there that then open up and allow what in? Well, it's in the name. It's ions. They allow ions in. And those ions can be sodium, which is a positively charged ion. It is a cation. It can allow calcium in. That's a positively charged ion, a cation. And there's also metabotropic receptors. That gets into the whole GPCRs, G protein coupled receptors. That's going to come up in another question I have where somebody was asking about how caffeine affects neurons. We're going to be talking about that because that refers to the adenosine that we were talking about in the video that this question was posted about, all right, or posted on, I should say. All right, so we're going to get to that. We're just talking about ion channels here, all right? So the ion channels, it lets in sodium ions in there and calcium, depending. It's like if it's an NMDA receptor, which is a type of glutamate receptor, it allows in calcium ions, etc. All right. The whole purpose of that, allowing in these sodium ions and calcium ions, is to depolarize the neuron, depolarize the cell. So what's that? So the inside of the neuron is negatively charged when it's just kind of chilling. It's called the resting membrane potential. It's about negative 70 millivolts. So inside the neuron is negative, all right? Outside the neuron, it's positive. Well, why is that? Well, first of all, you have more sodium sitting out there outside the neuron. You have more calcium sitting outside the neuron. Those are positively charged ions. Those are cations, so they're making it more positive. Inside the neuron, you have more potassium ions, which potassium is a cation, but you also have various anions, etc., that can be inside the neuron. That's one reason why it makes the inside of the cell negative, the resting membrane potential being negative 70 millivolts, roughly around there. I'll put it here. Why is that? Well, the sodium's hanging out there, so it's positively charged. Inside, you'll have like chloride ions. Those are negatively charged. That was a clip from a previous video I did where I talked about how there's more chloride ions inside the cell and that can help to make it negative. That's actually wrong. See, folks, if I catch myself making a mistake, I want to admit it because I'm here to learn, just like hopefully you all are here to learn. So I make mistakes all the time. Heck, yeah. I mean, that could be a whole month worth of episodes about just the mistakes that I made in the past week alone. At least what some people tell me. There's actually more chloride ions outside the cell than inside the cell. But the point is that's one reason why inside the cell it's negative, outside the cell it's positive.